All right, Trent, you good?
Yep.
All right. Plan: resolve public colleges and universities in the United States ought not restrict any constitutionally protected speech that criticizes the military's policies, harms patriotic correctness on campuses, runs rampant, dissents, charge of treason, lines of critical thought, are signs higher education to be co-opted by the military-industrial complex, reducing the roles of teachers to military conditions. Members of the college campuses are routinely fired. They criticize the military, causing a chilling effect. On such discussion, multiple empirical examples prove. Wilson 15. Emphasize faculty and students make others more likely to speak openly. 9/11 change academic freedom. Libraries and hardships suspended after criticizing American policies in Iraq. Military abuse professors, job and conservatives contended that few cases proved that police over a rule of college campuses. My survey of active freedom found the opposite. Critics of the Bush administration suffered by one of the most numerous violations of patriotic credits remained supreme after 9/11. And this is devastating because higher education is the uniquely key institution that can provide spaces for conversations and action that snowball into cultural shifts away from militarism. Joshua Gaudreau 7. Higher education is one of the most crucial institutional spaces where empower can be identified, critically engaged. One of the few spaces where people can critically learn values that refuse to secure state development skills necessary to defend democracy. Advantage one's cultural shift. The attitude students to refuse to admit the militarism. In this case, the cultural shift away from the glorification of violence strategy of Mara 14. Militarism showed notions of patriotism and reward the academy rest just define the enemy. The police state not reveals a battle cry defending the integrity of the nation requires producing a system by regulated boundaries to express in the university. And militarism is part of the culture, making people disposable, justifying and creating everyday violence against the Middle East and other. They allow students and professors to refuse this culture strategy of Mara 2. The post-9/11 culture contra the racial aspect of the terrorist cinemas with the Muslim, this culture imaginary legitimate violence against anti-Western governance, criminalization of those considered threats to national security, Muslim Arab students are subjected to scrutiny, and this culture over back at home justifying and creating everyday violence. Hedge good doesn't impact her the app. We get to stay in the military while still recognizing it makes mistakes. Giroux 16. Shootings that become routine cultural violence, the armed industry and military take foreign policy as the state's tool to enforce domestic terrorist and civil society degenerate to a military organization. Everyday state violence are nursed. Militarization is a powerful social logic, constituent values more and more people are considered disposable. This outweighs 8 points root cause. Once people violence becomes normalized, then anything including negative impacts can occur and no one cares, making solving them impossible. B points aggregation militarism impacts constantly occur, which means they aggregate every single day. By the time the negative impacts occur, the app will massively outweigh in magnitude. Advantage 2 is political spillover. Academics have used state research on their own academic freedom to create positive policy change, proving that liberalizing the university creates concrete material impacts. Slaughter 88. University currently includes subjects, communities treated in an incidental way. State-funded university provided research based on the growth of knowledge. Professors engaged in a generally alternative points. Professors that work with a wide variety of external groups, particularly in Nicaragua, present thought-out policy alternatives to support professors exchange expertise from a wide variety of external groups. And military powers unstable, trying to expand power when failing triggers resentment, which link turns their offense. Mahar 11. Material advantage translates to outcomes decline. The U.S. positions and consequent unipolarity. China has new asserters. Russia is using energy to reassert dominance. Brazil's growing influence. And imbalances of power create apprehension and friends and rivals. Predominance makes tend to target and breeds resentment. Now, framework. Ethics is divided between ideal and non-ideal theory. Ideal theory asks what justice demands in a perfect world, while non-ideal theory asks what justice demands in a world that's already unjust. Preferred non-ideal theory is a meta-ethical starting point. 1. Social reality. Ideal theories ignore social values, which in turn contradict ideals. Normative ideals aren't created separately from the social norms that govern us because those influence what we count as an ideal in the first place. Mills of 5. If we start from the ultimate point of ethics, then the framework will be anti-ethical to the goal of ethics. Idealist models are abstracted away from crucial reality, crucially comprehension. The ideal will never be achieved. 2. Standpoint epistemology. Ideal theory strips away questions of particularities and isolates a universal feature agent. This normalizes a single experience and epistemic excuse ethical reasoning. Mills 2. Theorizing takes place in intellectual wrong, perspective of the experience of the privileged, global, obscure, reality, ignoring oppression, ignores the consequences. We can abstract the moral edge of featureless, non-ideal theory recognizes people will be cognitively affected by social location. Descriptive concepts are right that may be misleading. Thus, the standard is resisting material inequalities. Non-ideal theory necessitates consequentialism and following rules that are similar to article playing field. We take steps to correct the material injustice. Prefer additionally 1. States have no active mission distinction, which means they are responsible for the state of affairs they bring about. So constraint-based theories collapse the consequentialism sustained in Vermeulen 5. Unlike individuals, governments always a necessary choice between among possible policies for regulating third parties. Distinction between active missions may not be intelligible. Governments and business create permissions and prohibitions. Governments fully complicit with any harm and allows all means-based theories classified 2 violations require aggregation. 2. Only consequences are relevant because the government is a collection of individuals who doesn't have a unified intent. Even if it does, there is no way to epistemologically access it. And conflicting side constraints means that state always violates rights with every action. Take the only consequential result criticizes equal ways to all citizens rather than arbitrary valuing certain people or procedural methods. Prefer governments with obligations because obligations differ by agents. Surgeons have an obligation to cut open people. Well, that would be repugnant for a normal person to do. 3. Only naturalism is epistemically accessible. Papineau 11. If moral facts lie outside this range, then moral facts can never make any difference. Knowledge of the spatio-temporal world is mediated by physical processes. If moral facts can only influence the physical world, then it's hard to see how we can have any knowledge of them. And experience is epistemic, is how we empirically ground our existence. Pain is universally bad and pleasure is universally good. Nagel 86. Sensory pleasure is good and pain bad, no matter who they are. Everyone takes the avoid the pain, promotion, pleasure, subjective reason for action without positive reason. There's nothing good or bad about having experience. We can't disregard the karmic expression to the contrary as a collective illusion. 4. Aggregation through looking at consequences is key to valuing the objective end of all rational beings. Comiskey 90. Kant describes the categorical imperative as duty to make others and my own. Kant also may say that to be happy is the desire of every rational being. We have a positive duty to promote happiness. It's consequences of generous both positive and negative duties, and there are many such which involve prima facie conflict. We need a rationale for giving priority to one duty rather than the other. Kant argues that the strong ground obligation prevails without account how one ground can be stronger than the other does not provide practical guidance. 5. moral substitutability is true and only consequentialism explains it, still not Armstrong 92. If there's more reason to do X, and if A cannot do X without doing Y, and if doing Y will enable A to do X, and there's a more reason to do Y, I call this principle moral sustainability. He continues, what gives me reason to start the mower is the consequence that I can mow the grass. He continues, non-consequentialist claim, if I promise to mow the grass, there's reason to mow the grass. It would not follow that I have a reason to start my mower since I not promise to start my mower. 6, inequality creates a flawed epistemic conclusion. B, cannot fairly test their ethical claims without rectifying it first. Medina 11. Perspectives contain experiences hitting the hegemonic mainstream framework. Subject to knowledge is made visible. The critical task is to reason right. Subject to knowledge is epistemic structure requires subjects to destabilize status quo until they are given a voice for their marginalized potential to exert resistance. Established frameworks to come up with the contestation. Underview. 1. All theory argues that implicit afflex and most recent picks late Elon show huge next side bias. Adler 15. A late Elon round 61% also means presumption and presumptibility flow. If I did the better debate at the end of the round, if I did the better debate at the round time, but nothing indicates triggers presumption. 2. Vote after I would counter my neg T in theory that's dropped the debater. 8-point afflex. The negatives built to an either list of the avenues stable and 2 ways to short to win. You show and play defense against the 2 and R theory argues the avenues reciprocal if any more reciprocal avenues. That's not a problem. Long 2 and R B points rest possible only. They could be T because only F has a burden to topical. Thus the avenues and RV had to compensate the negative unique avenue to about 3. Evaluate after the Lexley prior negativity. The negatives built to win. Their shell. Be back their shell, after shell in the long 2 and R, which is possible. Be back to shell, my shell, in the short 2 and the 2 and R exposes next strategic option, but app needs to sit down 1 R to win. 2 I prefer that it's 8 points by the structure of the app, so it's next to apply to more rounds, best of the same norms. Cut it, norms.
Okay, so you didn't read the B point.
Yeah.
Or anything after it.
Okay.
Yeah. You good for CX?
Yep.
Okay. So the standard is resisting material inequalities, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
So if there are structural inequalities in the status quo, i.e. if there are systemic obstructions to sort of people gaining certain types of material benefits, then we would say that the value criterion is to remove those or minimize those. So, for example, our app contextualizes this to how certain races are discriminated against within the university or have been objectified into these terrorist objects that they aren't.
Okay, so what are the impacts of the app that link to that standard?
Okay, sure. So the one I was just talking about, that's the cultural shift argument that our Advantage 1 talks about. I think
Which part? Is that CNM 2?
That's both of them. I think CNM 2 probably contextualizes it better.
Okay. What's the impact?
Sure. So CNM 2 explains that in post 9/11, the culture that we conjured up for ourselves because we were choosing to suppress academic dissent in favor of patriotic correctness. What that does is that it makes the word terrorist synonymous with the word Muslim. What that did was it made the word terrorist synonymous with the word Muslim. In other words, we basically painted all Muslims with this broad stroke saying that you're all terrorists and that if you even give sympathy to these people, then you're considered unpatriotic.
Why is that a militarism problem, though? Problem? Like, we just don't like other people, right?
It's deeper than that. Our Wilson 15 evidence indicates that this post 9/11 culture is conflated with hyperactive support of institutions, including the military, which spills over.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's my next question. So now you're saying the root cause is 9/11. Where does that tie in the university?
I didn't think I said that the root cause is 9/11. That provides more inherency.
Major cause.
Yeah. That provides the inherency of the app. What?
Why does the university matter?
Because our Josh and Giroux evidence indicates that it's the one institution in a world that has been corrupted by patriarchal correctness that can disrupt people, disrupt the status quo. Also, our Slaughter evidence indicates that...
Aren't most colleges super liberal Democrats that oppose Trump?
Not necessarily. Our Wilson 15 evidence...
Okay, so let's take this example. 30 schools just opposed Trump's latest travel ban. Does that mean it's not actively something that Trump's pursuing?
I think the impact of the app go beyond just Trump.
I think you and I both know that colleges are a liberal bubble that don't really have an impact on society.
Yeah, but even if you win, that they're say hyper liberal. Wilson 15 inherent evidence indicates that even if you have these super liberal institutions, they get repressed by administrators or by people complaining to administrators. There are multiple empirical examples that prove our inherency. So even if,
do you have inherency for why universities are actively restricting militarism, anti-militarism speech in the squirrel?
Yeah, that's the Wilson card I was just talking about.
Okay. You said Steinmetz, right? I think so.
Yeah.
Starting now.
I'm good.
Okay, everyone's good.
Yeah, what's the order?
2 off AC.
Cool.
Interpretation on the Jan. Feb. 2017 LD topic. The affirmative must defend the public colleges and universities not restrict any form of constitution protected speech in any way they can, affirm by arguing only against only one form of speech restriction. B. They only advocate not restricting anti-militaristic speech. They don't defend general non-restriction of speech. C. Is the standards for semantic accuracy. The predicate of the resolution is not restricting any constitutional protected speech. The absence of a single restriction fails to verify the predicate. Just as the absence of price controls wouldn't make it sure that we don't regulate any aspect of the economy. Semantic accuracy is a strong link to fairness in education. Since the text is the only staple basis for prep and independent voters, since assigned sides on a fixed topic are a constitutive feature of debate too is ground quality. Letting the aspect on this topic allows him to force the neg onto substantively impossible ground. E.g., he can defend that we don't prohibit blasphemy and force me to defend anti-blasphemy rules, or he can defend that we don't ban students from talking about blueberries and force me to advocate that we do ban students from talking about blueberries. This standards topic specifics. So don't let him answer with generic but good arguments. My interpret allows back on all the topics. Ground skew or ground quality skew fairness. It's impossible for me to win if I have to defend the indefensible lawsuit. Turns afflex because it literally means the neg has no flexibility because the neg is limited to one option. Also, the affirmative the counter interpretation is uniquely bad for afflex because the app is necessarily limited to one plan text, which means it can never be flexible to one RCU. Are uniquely losing the voters. Versus fairness and voters, since debates a game in fairness and constitutional value for any competition and the ballot as you determine the better debate, which you can if the round is skewed to education is and the next one is education, since it's a terminal value of debate and the portable value we take away when we graduate, and it's a recent schools fund debates are prerequisite to other goals of activity. Drop the debater. A, to deter future BSB for the promotes good norms, e.g. no one uses ellipses anymore because theory in they, and C, they force me to invest time on theory, so there's no guarantee that dropping the argument can restore an equal playing field. Competing interpretation, since A, reasonability is arbitrary, demands a vague threshold for abuse that forces judge intervention, and B, creates a risk at the bottom where debaters will stay just under the threshold for reasonable abuse to gain competitive advantage. And C, competing interprets guarantees the best. No should rate since we always choose the better rule. No RVIs. 1. Deters legitimate theory. 2. Incentivizes abuse. Since good theory debaters can use abusive strategy to debate theory and then collapse their prep outs on the theory debate to win on the RVI. 3. There is already 2 ways straight. I have to invest time in reading the shell that trades off with other issues on the flow. So if I lose theory, I'm already at a disadvantage. Also, grant new responses to the AC underview. The A point is I do not know how it will be applied until it's extended. And the B point is it is not applied. The B point is it is not actively weighed against any other arguments, and I cannot respond to how it interacts with things until the interaction is done. Now I negate. Next off. Ethical obligations derived from interactions among moral agents. Course. Reciprocity obtains between free and equal person to make the ends of another your own. You must regard her as a source of value who has the right to decide on her own actions. In order to entrust your own ends to another, you must suppose that she regards you that way. People in relation to reciprocity must be prepared to share their ends and hold them jointly. You will enter into reciprocity only with someone you expect to deal with reasons in a rational way. Reciprocity requires that you hold the other responsible. Thus, our ethical duties are mutually voluntary relations of reciprocity. And these arguments uniquely generate moral obligations. Godier. A contradictory theory of morals enables us to demonstrate the rational, even partial constraints on the pursuit of individual interest to persons who take no interest in others' interests. Those who claim that moral principles are objects of rational choice in circumstances fail to establish the rationality of actual compliance. Those who claim to establish the rationality of compliance appeal to a conception of reason that seems to incorporate prior moral suppositions as an alternative account generates morals from a non-moral base. Thus, the standards consistent with contractual obligation, I contend that universities must regulate constitution protected speech in order to meet their contractual obligation to educate. First, protected speech is subject to reasonable restriction in order in college classrooms for the purposes of education. 11th Circuit of the U.S. Court of Appeals notes. A university classroom is not an open forum during instructional time. School facilities may be public forums only if the school has opened them for use by the general public. Facilities reserved for other purposes are not public forums, and school officials may impose restrictions on the speech of students, teachers, and others during instructional periods. The university's classrooms are reserved for the teaching of a particular course. University administrators and instructors are obligated to regulate speech to ensure that students have access to topical instruction. If a physics professor permits a group of students to engage in a long discussion of Nazism or Chaucer, they violate the university's contractual agreement to provide physics instruction. Since education requires prioritizing content knowledge, no means less restrictive than the regulation of speech exists. Thus, colleges are contractually obligated to impose content-based restrictions. Rousseau. Students at public universities pay fees to attend classes, and universities have contractual obligations to provide adequate teaching to enable them to pursue their courses, and passing exams requires effective and timely delivery of content and appropriate standards of teaching. Chapel education by its nature requires strict regulation of the expression, where professors require that students write papers on a subject, discuss the topic, or remain silent during lectures. Common spaces may require unlimited speech, and good professors may permit wide-ranging discussion of the relevant topics, but the core purpose of universities is to deliver instructional content, which may require content-based regulation of speech. Further, in the context of student-professor relations, free speech is leveraged to disrespect professors of color, black faculty authorities undermine the right to govern the classroom as key fields. strained relations, constantly having one's credentials questions, lack of respect, cultural, social, and professional alienation. Many black professors who teach in predominantly white campuses face these problems, and more the morale of black faculty, however, is being undermined in ways not experienced and seldom understood by their white male colleagues. African American faculty often carry the burden of being viewed as affirmative action hires. You have to prove yourself in ways white colleagues do. And black scholars comprise almost 5% of the nation's higher education. Black scholars often find themselves the only black faculty on campus. AC. Overview to the framework. Contracts necessarily preclude. The first reason is that contracts necessarily define individuals and define who is an agent. Otherwise, we're infinitely abstract because we never understand it. We never understand it before we actually write things down. The second argument is that contracts are by definition the most real and non-abstract, and that they are writing down and holding individuals accountable. 3, only contracts are enable us to actually have an enforcement mechanism where ensure that individuals ever follow soon their obligations. Uniquely turns material inequities because otherwise the individuals with more power can always take advantage of other individuals. 4, contracts establish a mechanism for what constitutes equity. Otherwise, we can constantly get out. Get out of the debate. Also, he says that after it comes prior to neg theory, but this is not specific to T. After it cannot preclude neg T because the affirmative does not have topicality, and topicality necessarily precludes other debates because topicality necessarily controls engagement on the entire substantive debate. Now, in overview of the AC on the Wilson evidence, nativism is necessarily the root cause. It is not related to militarism. It is necessarily separate of it demonstrated by Trump's election. Universities are necessarily unrelated. The universities has nothing to do with Trump's election, which means that if anything, universities are not related. If anything, they're uniquely do the opposite. Also, on JNG, colleges first colleges is necessarily a separate liberal bubble with literally no sway. The means the affirmative is literally an active ruse. There's no reason to think that colleges ever have any sway in doctrine. There's a liberal bubble, whereas we have a Republican administration, Republican Congress. Also, an advantage one first overview. The culture necessarily stems from the government, not from college campuses, demonstrated by the fact that Trump's election changed a lot of actions and behavior. Second term, the plan enables the redefining of what is militaristic, which is necessarily militaristic in itself because the hegemon is defining things. 3, you are to turn double bind. Either A, there's no enforcement mechanism on individuals, or B, you're militaristic because you're forcing individuals to do something.
Okay. Ready?
Yep.
All right. What was that last turn double bind?
Yeah. Either A, you have no enforcement mechanism and thus no change occurs because students can still restrict the speech of other people, or B, you do have an enforcement mechanism, in which case you're militaristic because you're actively forcing individuals to take one action by a means of coercion.
Okay. All right. That's cool. All right. Let's talk about the NC now. Let's say I spent 4 minutes in the 1AR just like link turning it, and I won that my link turns outweigh the solvency of your NC offense. Are there any arguments that you could extend independently in the 2NR that would outweigh my link turns?
Are you asking if there are any a prioris?
Yeah, yeah.
No, there are no a prioris in the NCA.
Okay, cool. Are there any arguments in the NCA that are meant to trigger presumption or permissibility?
No.
Okay, sure. All right, let's talk about the NC now. You say that the contractual obligation of universities to provide an education for people. Why is restricting speech necessary for that?
Yeah. So that is stemming from the Rousseau evidence and the analytic before and after it. The argument is that in instances in which students are going on about unrelated topics, i.e. if it's a physics lecture and someone's ranting about how the military sucks, a professor should be able to limit that speech to the specific topic.
Okay. How about in the context of like someone whose like role is not necessarily like totally for the purpose of like teaching? For example, one of the examples mentioned by inherency evidence mentions like a library assistant. Like, how is your argument contextualized to that?
If the person were actively interrupting the purpose of the library, i.e. if it's a quiet zone and someone has a demonstration about militarism, I would say that's still in the contract of something that should be restricted.
All right, cool. We'll talk about the T-shell now. You say that semantic accuracy is somehow an independent voter because there's assigned sides. What is the impact to like my violation of assigned sides? I don't understand that.
The impact is that the debate no longer is resolvable or has any implication in that we have fixed sides, and that is how the judge votes, right? So if the judge cannot vote based off of the assigned side, that no longer is possible. And since voting is a constitutive feature, it comes first.
Okay, cool. All right, yeah. Let's talk about. All right, let's talk more about the framework. You say that the first Korsgaard evidence, ethical obligations derived from interactions among moral agents. what is like? I don't understand the warrant in this card.
You're on course card. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see.
What's
The warrant for why it's based off of interactions between moral agents. The argument is that in order to the specific warrant from the card is in order to entrust your own ends to another, you must suppose that she regards you that way.
Why? Actually, that's fine. I'll take prep. All right, so T. All right, T. Case. DNC. All right, everyone good? I'm gonna take that as a yes. Counterinterpretation: the affirmative defense speech that criticizes the military if the actually scratch the disclosure plank. The first installs any of the limits and ground stairs. 8 point less than 20, but there's only a few less than 20 plans are disclosed, which means that you could have prepped out the plan B point. The counterinterpretation only allows my app, not any other. Second, that benefit is death plan because it shows in-depth debate about only anti-military speech. Whole rest asks means that specifically drowned out by generic discounts. Like hate speech also means I force better research that outweighs 8 point magnitude cross apply. 009 talk about military spills over into the real world, which means the outweigh B point error on the side of plans. It's a TOC topic, which means that it's the one topic we actually go several months on, which means that in-depth education is key. Now overview. Side-bias impact turns all their offense. App needs unfair plans to equalize the playing field. You can see the Adler 15 evidence, which means that affirming is necessarily harder, which means that even if there was a marginal amount of abuse on the app plan is justified if there's structural skew. Now, onto your ground standard. First turn, their internalized picks out distance, ANC, and type of speech like hate speech, expect multiple impacts, 8 point, no unique, all their limits, and ground office, negative statistics, costing research overload, exacerbate side-bias, B point, outweighs picks with AC offense, saying most of it, at least the negative reactivity could default generics like Capricorn, which also means no abuse on SAP 2. Turn, there's so many arguments you can read against this app, generics, office turns, hedge impact turns, patriarch, counterplay, cap K, particulars, protest, dissent, politics, University case data. Okay, all these have been read against me. More options would give you way too much Netflix. 3, we only expect the type of a topic of speech, i.e., anti-military speech, not a method of speech, which means you could make specific index to classroom discussions or protests or university publications, which means that there's tons of viable ground for you. Also, specific topic doesn't deny you anything else. 4, the inherency evidence of the Wilson 15 card indicates that the plan hasn't happened for a reason, which is also another reason as to why there is a constraint on the amount of the top spec apps there are, because even if there are truism apps, they're not necessarily inherent, which means that they're not good apps. Now, onto your semantics arguments. Overview. 1, Cambridge Dictionary defines any context resolution as using negative statements surrounding this possible amount, which outweighs because of the context of the next statement, which is what the resolution is, concludes one not. Second, the app is debate, no talk about baseball. 99% closer in terms of their terms, bad for debate, vote, app on strict and link. 3, pragmatic, so all the benefits, semantics, that way, eventually will be consistent with pragmatic, it's only just by voter, and you see that you say that keep appearing on a prep, but people semantically interpret the text of the topic of the prep. They look at disclosure and literature, the fact that people have been running points for years, at least they're a huge all cause. Now you access the impact. Now you say that semantics is an independent voter, but you just impacted back to resolvability, which is empirically denied because every round has always been able to resolve. Now the plan. Starting on the framework. First, you have conceded multiple independent reasons as to why you prefer the framework. Even if their overview is true, there are several arguments that epistemologically indict the starting point of the NC, which means that they become lexically prior to ending the overview arguments, which assume the truth of the NC itself. First, because of the Papineau 11 evidence said that natural is the only way to value impacts. It's the only way we determine what moral truth is by filtering it through our senses. But filtering it through our senses requires us to default to consequentials in the first place. And the other epistemological argument you have conceded is the Medina 11 evidence, which indicates that inequality epistemically skews our as well as the second Mills 05 evidence. That these epistemically skew our thought, and these all come prior to their arguments because any of the overview assume the truth of the NC itself, not doesn't interrogate how the NC got to its conclusion. Now on the overview proper, first you say that contracts preclude and define individuals, but that's not necessarily true. We've been able to define our individuals even without contracts. Second is that you say that contracts are the most real, but first it's empirically denied. Contracts have been used to abuse people. For example, the Constitution was a contract, but that Gene Black's 3/5 of the person, 3/5 you say only contracts have the power to enforce, but that is but on any enforcement argument he makes on the AC, those are incoherent because the affirmative is a negative state action, which means that there is no necessary there's no conception of enforcement. Now the case offense real quick. First on the term that you say that we simply redefine militarism. No, that's denied. We only allow more for a free dissent against anti-militaristic speech. Now you say that there's a term double bind because we either enforce against people or we don't have any enforcement. But the affirmative is a negative state action, which means the conception of enforcement regarding free speech is incoherent to begin with. We simply allow more dissent to happen, which allows this kind of anti-militaristic shift that we talk about in the 1AC offense. The NC first on the offense, first turn. The constituent feature of academia is to offer up this dissent. That's a drastic role evidence in the face of overwhelming patriarch correctness. That means that the AC is a massive link to it. Second is that the universities should be able to use their academic resources in order to challenge the state. That was a slaughter evidence, which is conceded. Is another link to the affirmative. Third is that turn our app opens up more space for education and better opportunities for education by decreasing racial hostility against Muslims, which makes education more valuable on campuses, which link turns to NC.
Starting prep. A few questions. The first is, did you go for an RVINT?
No.
No RVINT. Okay. Next question is, what is the second term to the NC?
Okay.
TACNC. And on the AC, are you starting on the framework debate or the contention debate?
Contention.
All right.
I'll make it clear.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I'm good.
Okay. The T debate is laughable. He does not go for an RVI, and his definition against semantic accuracy is a pro-negative definition. When we define any as some or even the smallest amount of, we mean that we do not restrict literally even the smallest amount. The affirmative world allows us to restrict the smallest amount of speech, i.e., any speech that is not anti-militaristic means that you do not meet your definition. This definition seems like something that would support you, but it's not in the context of a sentence. Let's go to the semantic accuracy standard. Extend the semantic accuracy standard that the predicate of the resolution is not to restrict any constitutionally protected speech. You have conceded that it's a truism that if we say the absence of price, it would not make any sense to say the absence of price controls. It doesn't mean it means that we don't regulate any aspect of the economy. It means that you are losing. You can extend the semantic accuracy necessarily comes first because the constitutional feature debate is to have one side voted for. You say the resolvability is necessarily inevitable, but that is only because we have a conception of sides to begin with. We cannot vote after negative. We do not have a conception of what side that is on. You already unnecessarily there's something beyond the jurisdiction. Extend the interpretation of the LD topic. The affirmative must defend the public colleges and universities not to restrict any form of constitutional protected speech. Extend the violate because you only advocate not restricting anti-militaristic speech. You have conceded that fairness is a voter and not extended education, and none of your impacts are against education. So you can extend the fairness of a voter because debate is a game and fairness is a constituent value of any competition. Also, extend drop the debater to deter future BSB because it promotes good norms. Because no one uses ellipses anymore. And C because they force me to invest time on theory. Also, semantic accuracy necessarily outweighs the rest of the debate because you concede because it is necessarily independent voter and controls their understanding of how our arguments are implicated. Also outweighs any defense against it because you concede because your definition necessarily is in my favor, which means I am always going to be outweighing because you have even conceded it by reading a definition in its favor. Let's go to the AC. There are a few key points that you've conceded, given that the AC is pretty much the only place you can win. I'll get to the turns later on the NC. They're not very good. Let's start on the J and G evidence. You have conceded that the colleges are necessarily a separate liberal bubble, which means the AC has no impact because the AC presumes the fact that colleges have a sway. But you have conceded that colleges didn't support Trump, but Trump is still our president, and we still have a Republican Congress, even though everyone is liberal on college campuses, which means that you have lost this debate because you have conceded that you do not have any sway on any implications. You've also conceded the second term because you thought it was the same as the third. The second turn on the overview to the advantage one is that the plan enables us to constantly define what is militaristic and what is anti-militaristic, which enables further militarism because the state is the hegemon and they are constantly defining what is true and what is normative, and necessarily means that the AC is necessarily circular and at a minimum is the roots of solvency, but at worst and most likely is necessarily militaristic in and of itself. You've also misunderstood the third argument. Your cross-sex exchange was damning. You conceded that the affirmative would still need some kind of enforcement mechanism to prevent students from actively restricting the speech of other people when it's anti-militaristic, which means that you're in a double bind because either A, that it's not unique because students will be the ones restricting anti-militaristic speech. Trust me, there are still a lot of people that support the military, even if you do not. Or B, you are militaristic because you are enforcing things. You are forcing people to do certain things, which means that there is no impact to the app. Let's go to the MC. Let's start on the turns. They're not very good. The first is that academia is necessarily the constitutional purpose is to offer dissent. This does not make any sense because there can still be dissent, just not in a college classroom. That is more specific to academia. Academia is more specific. That is why it functions. Additionally, none of your responses make any sense in that they are about constitutivism, and I am talking about contractarianism. They are very different. I do not justify constitutivism whatsoever, and constitutive things are not something we sign on to. Additionally, you say that the colleges necessarily the colleges are necessarily used as a resource, but this does not have any implication in terms of why professors do not need the ability to restrict things in specific classrooms, and also the negative is not constantly inconsistent with the app. It still enables some form of speech. Additionally, you say that which means your cross application does not have any impact. Also, your third argument is that the app opens up more spaces for Muslim individuals, but that presumes that you'd have solvency, which means that you'd have to win the app to begin with. So you're obviously not going to be winning. You're not going to be winning on this contention. even further, but the negative is necessarily outweighing because the only contract that is being read is a contract that professors may be specific to the curriculum in the classroom, which means that it does not matter that they're actively including individuals, and also still the fact that individuals are still being included even if active ideologies against it, because colleges are still liberal bubbles, which you've conceded. Also, it's in the Court of Appeals evidence. Protected speech is necessarily subject to restriction. That is my inherency. You've also conceded the Russo analysis that universities' obligation is to restrict to certain topics, which means this is always outweighing. You also conceded a turn to the AF, which is that black faculty is undermined and they necessarily need authority, which means you are the root cause of material inequities, which necessarily turns the AF because it shows that black faculty are the reason why black faculty is undermined, because you are telling them what they can and cannot do, especially in the context of anti-militaristic speech. Now let's go to the AC. Let's go to the overview of the framework debate. Your argument seems to make sense in the abstract, but it really does not. You say it is lexically prior because we are presuming that the NC is true. Yes, that is how debate works. We presume fiats. The AC has the same issue. We are presuming that the arguments you read are true, and when we are evaluating things when they're conceded, and you've also conceded the entire the NC, so I think it's a safe assumption that it is true. So let's extend the fourth argument that you've conceded, that only contracts establish what is equitable and what is a mechanism to determine equity, which means the AC has no impact if we do not have an equity mechanism to determine it, which means that the NC always operates as a prerequisite. It also means you do not get to apply any of your AC impacts to it because the negative is a prerequisite to the AC having the real impacts. Overview. First place to vote is on T. I'm winning on semantic accuracy. He has no RVIs. He's conceded that he does not get RVIs because because he does not go for an RVI. He's also losing very badly on the NC. His turns are nonsensical. They're about constitutivism. I'm about contractarianism. He's also conceded several turns to the AF, and colleges are a liberal bubble, which means that the entirety of the AF is non-unique.
Okay, cool. I had a minute 10 left.
NCT?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
All right, everyone good?
Yep.
All right. We're going to go for two turns here on the NC. The reason as to why the affirmative of holding of the exact contract that they talk about. First turn we're going to go for is the racial hostility argument. All your arguments that you gave in the last speech about why the AF would necessarily disrupt black professors, or why universities must provide an education to students, or reasons as to why this turn is true and outweighs. We have one offense that on the CNM evidence on the AF as reasons as to why the AF breaks down the notion of militarism that causes racial hostility against Muslim students and faculty. Even if you try to accept both your turns about how the state, the hegemon, can simply redefine militarism, or that we would have to require some kind of enforcement mechanism against in order to promote our kind of dissent. Even if your turns are true, our turn still here outweighs. We'll concede all your framework arguments. So it's a question of what contracts are being held in the first place. And this is clearly where the turn outweighs, because you do not implicate the two turns on the AF, and the reason as to why they're a violation of contractarianism, and the turn here and the impact framing here was clear in the 1 AR as reasons as to why the affirmative offense on the CN evidence promotes a more education safe environment for students to learn it, which is the goal of the university, which means that we turn the NC. The next term we're going to go for is the Slaughter 88, the cross application of Slaughter 88 evidence that you say that it has no application to contractarianism, but the very NC offense that you read will explain why the university must provide some kind of educational atmosphere, or which is exactly what the Slaughter 88 evidence says, that the goal that the obligation of university professors and faculty and students is to promote, is to encourage the kind of dissent that creates constructive in the kind of policy. That was their contractual obligation as educators and students, which means that the AF is a better fulfillment of the NC standard than the NC offenses. There's no weighing done. There's no weighing done between that and the offense. Their offense and the 200 that they say the 200 is extremely generic, is not specific to the kind of offense that we talk about in the AF, which means they should prefer our offense in terms of specificity. Now to the T debate. There are multiple Trent does a terrible job here because he sloppily extends the semantic accuracy standard without ever addressing the pragmatic reasons as to why their interpretation is bad, and you have conceded reasons as to why pragmatic reasons as to why our interpretation, to prefer our interpretation, have conceded that semantics just assumes the value of pragmatics, i.e. the only reason we even care about semantical accuracy is because we care about the pragmatic implications of fairness for education. You try to give independent voters regarding what sides to vote on. You say, but you have conceded the argument that your resolvability arguments are pragmatic because every round has been able to be resolved. Then you you say that it's just because we had conceptual alpha negatives, but no, we've had people vote for non-TS, which means that your argument is clearly empirically false. And on the semantic accuracy argument, even you have also conceded the fact that we are 99% semantically accurate because we're not debating a completely different topic. We are 99% close to your intro, which means that, and the only way you vote on a 1% semantic differential if you prove that 1% difference is significant anyway, but that assumes that there's some kind of pragmatic net benefit to that 1% semantic differential, which on that debate we have very clearly won. You have conceded the Pix argument on the ground standard, saying that you would simply call which turns to all the ground arguments. So basically on the T debate, we are close enough to their interpretation that it's not justified for you to vote on a 1% semantic differential without some kind of pragmatic reason to also vote on T, but they have not won that pragmatic debate.
Okay, guys. This is an interesting debate. I think that the easiest way for this to happen is maybe Trent, I can give you some feedback, and then Jonghock, you and I can talk after.
Sure. It sounds good.
So, Trent, I think the 2NR is potentially going for a little too much in the sense that I think that so I think given the 2AR choices, the 2NR strategy decisions make sense, but the 2NR strategy decisions to really sit on the NC is where I would potentially disagree with you. I would have, if I were you, just gone for T and then turns to the AF. Because right now you are sort of opening up. So your time allocation is almost 90 seconds on the NC winning the line by line of the NC, but you're only spending about 25 seconds winning the framework debate, right? You sort of run out of time there at the end. And so your 90 seconds that you spend on the NC are contingent on you winning the framework debate. And I think that though your argument about like only contracts establish what is equitable, so the NC is a prerequisite, is like a decent argument. There's just no comparison done with that and the epistemic hijacks from Papineau and Medina that the 1AR is going for, right? And I don't think the 1AR arguments are particularly good, but I think that there needs to be comparative analysis there. And like, for instance, you're like not really responding to the argument that like contracts are used to abuse people, like e.g. the Constitution, right? And so you're putting in a lot of time into the NC that you're not going to get a return on if the AF goes for case. And it seems like the time that you're spending on the AF, you're spending a lot of time winning the case answers that you're making, which I think is a good idea because it definitely does deny the solvency of the turns that Jonghock gives on the NC. But I think that at the point where you're spending that much time on the AF, like you have a winning ballot story on the AC itself, I would just collapse the debate to the AF so that way it prevents the 2AR from kicking out of the framework debate and going hard for your NC.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So that's just like obviously, you know, there are multiple differing opinions on time trade-offs and strategy, but I do think that right now you're going for all three ways you have out in the 2NR, which is topicality, turns on the AF, and the NC, and I think that you're losing some time that you could be spending elsewhere on the speech. So that's just like on a time trade-off perspective, something to potentially think about. So on topicality specifically, I think that you probably want to put some lip service on the like semantics collapse to pragmatics and the 99% close to your interp argument, because that makes the strength of link question on the semantical accuracy debate probably closer than you want it to be, right? Because even if you win this independent voter argument, I think that it's a question of what the size of link into the independent voter is, and your size of link, if the 99% close argument is true, would not be as high as you would probably want it to be.
Yeah, honestly, I just miss the pragmatic stuff for the most part.
Yeah, and so I don't know if that was a flowing issue on your end or if yeah, and so that's something where that's where I think the time allocation becomes most apparent. Like you could have saved a lot of unnecessary time on the NC flow, and you could have spent all the time you spent responding to his turns. You could have spent here on semantic accuracy, and that way you've closed a 2AR out. And you gain the time you need to fully execute the semantic accuracy debate to make it a much more coherent ballot on T.
Yeah, that makes sense. Really, my plan going into the 2NR was mostly to go for substance, and I wasn't. I went for T mostly so the 2AR couldn't collapse. But then I sat more on T than I probably should have to do that.
Yeah, I think if T was a time suck, you're spending like the right amount of time on it. I think that if it's something you're seriously going for, then you probably want a little bit more time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then I think looking back to the 1N, I'm not sure if this was intentional, but you dropped like all of the RVI justifications in the 1EC, and so you have 5 arguments going for you walking into the 2NR. The first 3 are obviously your no RVI justifications, and then the next 2 are your like new responses to AC underview arguments, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know, dude. That's like pretty risky. I would definitely like think about putting some lip service because you're just straight conceding afflex and reciprocity.
No, I know.
And I don't know if that's intentional, but like I don't. That's a risky decision.
Yeah, I agreed with that. No, while I was reading it, I was like, crap, I didn't really prep a ton of responses to that, so I sent 2 reasons for new responses and then somewhat tried to answer the warrants. But yeah, I mean, it was not ideal.
Yeah, and so I think one way you could fix that is I just recommend to my students to do the theory debate first and then do substance second. So my order, if I were you, would have been topicality, bottom of the AF, new sheet of paper, and then top of the AF.
Yeah.
And that way you do the theory debate all in one go and you don't forget about it. And that way, like, because like right now you get to the AF and you like quickly jump to the bottom and you make like one reason why the evaluate AF theory lexically prior is not specific to T. And then I thought you were going to go to the RVI arguments, but then you like jump to the top of the AF and start making like answers to the substance of the AF, and then you make like 4 framework arguments. So I don't know if that's like. I think if you restructure the organization in which you present your arguments, that might help you.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And like, so the other place I think the 1N was potentially lacking was there are like a couple of framework arguments I would definitely be line by lining if I were you. Like the government has no unified intent, like prefer government specific obligations argument. I think could potentially be leveraged in a damning way, right? Because if like the 1N doesn't have an explicit link to government obligations, and so if the 1AR is doing work on like, look, the government is not obligated to just follow contracts. We've tried that historically, like with the Constitution, and it's worked out terribly. That argument could be potentially concerning for you. And I think the other argument that could be potentially concerning is some of these epistemology hijacks. So I would like definitely put some lip service if I were you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And given that I think you made like probably about 10 or 11 arguments on case, and 4 of those were substantive or framework arguments, I would definitely try to take less prep time if I were you too, because that gives your 2NR more time to like think about what it wants to go for.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, honestly, I was not too I was not too pleased with the 1N. It's been a while since I've given a 1N, to be honest with you. So yeah. It was not the best. I thought that I thought I recovered more for the 2N, but yeah, the 1N I took too much prep time and didn't make as many arguments as I would have liked to.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I mean, this is why I think practice debates before TSC are helpful, so you just get your groove back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any more like specific strategy or content based questions you have if you have any.
Well, so you thought that the answers to case were good enough to collapse to then, right?
Yeah, I mean, the 1AR's literal answer is, I am a negative state action to return double bind, right? Like, the 1AR, like, dismisses, it also drops all these defensive arguments. I think the 1N should do a better job of explicitly framing them as terminal defense arguments right now, because a lot of judges will look at it as link defense and not terminal defense. So it's in your best interest to try to make it seem terminal.
Yeah.
So I would definitely try to do that in the 1N itself. But I think, like, given that he's dropping a crap ton of defense, like, if there's a risk of a link to your turn, it seems to be like a very easy neg ballot on substance.
Okay. Yeah. I've been hesitant because I've been screwed over at TOC before collapsing to turns because I can never gauge how decent I think the judge thinks a turn is.
Yeah, I mean, the rule of thumb, typically, I would give you two pieces of advice there. A is it's a question of lip service. Like, the more time you spend articulating the argument, the more likely it is somebody will vote off of it, right? So, like,
Mhm.
for instance, both of your turns are not particularly well developed.
No.
And they're not like really impacted, so it's not clear what like the sort of structural violence impact is at the end of the turn. So when you're making analytical turns, if that's something you want your judge to vote off of, I would definitely put lip service.
Mm.
And the second
Okay,
thing
yeah.
is evidence usually helps.
I agree. Yeah.
So if
This wasn't an app I'd heard of on this topic, to be honest with you. I'm not that exposed to the plans on this topic.
yeah, I mean that's fair. I think I was surprised your cross-ex focused entirely on the case. I would have focused a lot more on framework and because like that's the beauty of framework, right? Is you don't actually have to prep any of the plans. You can just framework them out of the debate anyways. And so like that's totally fine. But you ended up spending like almost 8 minutes of prep time to make like 6 arguments on case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right about that. No, the main reason I gathered that the AF was hedging its bets on me just engaging with framework. So I was like, well, I don't think the substance of this AF is that great. So I tried to engage with it with that. But yeah, I'll try to cut some cards with that too.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
totally up to you.
I don't think I have any other questions. Oh, do you think the two ends should just collapse to like one turn or go to both?
No, I
Like,
think quality
on the
over quantity always.
Yeah. Okay.
Consolidate, and like the same applies to just big picture strategy decisions. Like I think debaters are trying to give themselves like the thing I always tell my kids is like you do not win the round twice. Like the judge does not sign the ballot for you 2 times. You win it once, and so
That's true.
your 2NR does not have to have 3 ways out, right? Like
Just one.
it doesn't have to be just one because sometimes it's nice to split the 2AR and time suck them, right? Like here, if your out was 130 T, 430 case, the 2AR still has to spend time on T, right? And so you're still getting a good time suck out, but I think that going for too much kills your ability to consolidate one out like very well.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. I really appreciate that. I understand better how to like. If people always say to collapse the 2M, I never quite know the degree to which they want that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries. If you have any other questions, happy to answer them.
I don't think so. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Cool. So we will talk to you. I think you're doing a couple more debates with us this week, so we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, like 3 more, I think. I don't know. Do you know if the one with Parker is going on tomorrow?
Let's continue that conversation on Facebook chat. I'm not positive.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Sounds good.
See ya.
Take care, buddy.